Hello and welcome to another episode of KARE 11 on the Record. I'm political reporter Danny Spiewak. We're about 2 months away from the critical August primaries in the 2026 midterm election season, and there's a very competitive battle for the open U.S. Senate seat on the DFL side. The nomination is a fight between Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, who is the endorsed candidate after winning that endorsement at last week's convention, and Congresswoman Angie Craig. You've seen Craig on this show before. But this week, we are sitting down one-on-one with Lieutenant Governor Flanagan in her first in-depth interview since the convention to talk about the campaign, the path forward toward August, and the state's response to fraud. Well, Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being here at KARE 11. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you are now the DFL endorsed candidate for U.S. Senate. As you transition from the convention now to the primary process, how are you going to win over the primary voters in the Democratic Party in Minnesota?
Sure. Well, the DFL endorsement carries a lot of weight. And we're super excited that we were able to earn the overwhelming support of the delegates this weekend. And, what I know is that it's part of our overall strategy. We've done over 200 events all across the state of Minnesota, with the majority of those events being in greater Minnesota, building relationships with folks all across the state and, hearing directly from people about what's on their hearts and minds. We turn that into a lot of momentum going into Rochester, and I think folks should expect that continues to be the work that we do. I'm going to be on the road talking directly to Minnesotans and, organizing all across the state to win on August 11th and then to go on and win the general election in November.
Obviously, 8 years ago when you were running on the ticket with Governor Walz, it was reversed. You didn't get the endorsement at the convention and then pledged forward to the primary. To what extent do you think the endorsement really does matter in the minds of voters?
Well, I think it matters. And just to be, really clear, Congresswoman Craig was also participating in, pursuing this endorsement from February caucuses and heading through all of the Senate district conventions, local unit conventions, congressional conventions leading up to, the convention in Rochester. What we saw is that we were building overwhelming support going into that room. We knew that we had 75% of the delegates. Congresswoman Craig had 11% of those delegates, and she decided at the last minute not to participate in that process. I think it's a key difference, right? Governor Walz and I went through that process and went to the convention. There were several folks who were running at the time, and so we knew we were going to take it to a primary, but it was really important to participate and to be there with the delegates who were representative of the people who showed up to caucuses. And I think that's important for folks to know just about this year in particular. There were almost 40,000 people who went to their precinct caucus. 6% of the people who participated in caucus this year were Republicans. 15% were independents. And, they were there. And through that process, these delegates represented those almost 40,000 people. And 57% of those folks were brand new. And so I think the caucus and convention process has never been more representative of the party, and it also was, built by Minnesotans. I am grateful for their support, and I've been really humbled to be able to travel across the state, having conversations directly with people to earn their support.
You obviously have a tough primary. You're running against a sitting member of Congress right now, Congresswoman Craig, and she has, at this point, has out fundraised you. How are you going to make up the financial gap, as she does have a lot of significant support?
Well, to be clear, Paul Wellstone famously was outspent 7-1. I like our chances, but this is one of the key differences between Congresswoman Craig and myself. I've made the pledge to not take a dime dime of corporate PAC money. Congresswoman Craig has been funded by, corporate interests for the entirety of her career, both, like crypto, big pharma, big oil, APAC have all weighed in this race. They are spending millions of dollars to support my primary opponents. But, for me, I want to be beholden to Minnesotans and Minnesotans alone. I don't think that this Senate seat should be for sale. It belongs to the people of Minnesota. So, we're going to win this race by doing what we have done, which is grassroots organizing, meeting folks where they're at all across the state of Minnesota. And so far, that's been working out for us. We have led by double digits in the polls. We've got support from Senator Tina Smith, who currently holds the seat. And, now the power of the DFL endorsement and that infrastructure behind us. This is absolutely going to be a fight, but I'm confident that we'll be able to win in August.
Since the convention ended, Congresswoman Craig has been very aggressive in pointing out the donations made to the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that may undermine your message of not taking corporate money? So this is about the Peggy Flanagan for U.S. Senate campaign. In my own personal campaign, I am not taking a dime of corporate PAC money. Congresswoman Craig certainly cannot say the same thing. And, the contrasts in this race are about, who you're beholden to, corporate PACs and special interests. I'd say another key difference is, that I'm a supporter of Medicare for all. As I've traveled across the state talking to Minnesotans, this is the number one issue that comes up wherever we are, the high cost of healthcare. Congresswoman Craig doesn't support that. I think she is leaning towards more of a nibbling around the edges approach. But, Medicare for all is where Minnesotans are at, and that's what I'm going to fight for. And then finally, I'd say there's a contrast and support for ICE. Congresswoman Craig has was the only Minnesota Democrat to vote in favor of the Laken Riley Act, which strips immigrants of due process, allows for the indefinite detention of adults and children, and I think, gave the green light to the Trump administration to come in and terrorize our communities. And while, she says that she regrets that vote, just, few months later, after taking that vote, she voted to praise ICE when they were in the streets of Los Angeles separating families. So I think, Minnesotans have a choice. Do you want a progressive fighter who's delivered for working families throughout my entire career? Or do you want a, corporate Democrat who's supported by, a lot of the I'd say the entities who are responsible for the situation we find ourselves in, with an economy that's rigged for folks at the very top, while the rest of working families have to fight for scraps. I like our odds, and I'm grateful for folks who support us and the kind of agenda that we're building together. When you look at governing and the type of policy you would actually push for in the Senate, you mentioned Medicare for all, mm-hmm. or you're also in favor of universal child care. Yeah. You'd be coming in, if you were elected, you'd be coming into a climate with a Republican president, obviously, and who knows what would happen with Congress. But would that be realistic, those sorts of proposals, given the current climate in Washington?
I mean, I think what we see happening across Minnesota, but also across this country, is that people have been really clear that they are interested in bold leadership. They're sick and tired of, Democrats who are bending to Republicans, fighting from a defensive crouch or governing by sternly worded letter. I think they want to see that we've got some fight in us. And it doesn't, it's not just about why we need to win, but what we're going to do once we win. I've supported by 8 sitting U.S. senators. That is more than any other candidate who is running for Senate in the country. And this is a group of progressive champions like, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. And so we're going to go in with a really solid base of relationships and support to get to work. And folks need to see that we are active, that we are taking on this corrupt president and administration, and that's the work ahead. And I think again, like, that's a difference. Congresswoman Craig has bragged about voting with Republicans almost half the time. That just doesn't cut it anymore. People are asking for more, and we're going to demonstrate that that's what we're going to do.
On the primary trail or in a general election, fraud is sure to come up on the campaign trail, or fraud is sure to come up on the campaign trail against you. As the second leading executive in the state, to what extent should voters hold you accountable for the fraud that occurred?
Well, I want to be very clear that, Minnesotans are upset. They're angry about fraud, and, so am I. I know that this is an important issue to folks. What I would say is, the governor has said he wished that more had been done to tackle fraud. More should have been done sooner, and I agree. But I'm also encouraged by the governor and the legislature, moving really important policies to prevent fraud and stop it from happening in the first place. And just with this past, legislative session, the Office of Inspector General, a bipartisan bill being passed, that really matters. I also know that Republicans are going to have to answer for the fraud and corruption that's happening in Washington, and I want to take that on as a U.S. senator. Right out of the gate, Donald Trump pardoned 17 inspectors general whose whole job it was to police fraud and stop it from happening in the first place. He then went on to pardon 60 corporate white-collar criminals who've stolen, billions of dollars, and he's enriching himself and his family directly through the Oval Office in cryptocurrency. And every day there seems to be something that comes out of this administration. Most recently, we've found out that he's engaging in insider trading and enriching himself to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Regardless of which political party you're a part of, I don't think that folks are interested in that. And, we're going to make sure that Republicans, respond to the corruption that's happening under the Trump administration. And, right now, Michelle Tafoya, Adam Schwartzy, whoever, the Republican is coming out of the primary, not only have they not spoken to, this fraud and corruption that happens under Donald Trump, they're actually courting him and asking for his support in their races. So they're going to have to answer for that to their constituents too.
So you've been with the governor for 8 years, and obviously one of the primary reasons he didn't run for a third term was the attention around fraud. When Feeding Our Future and other parts of the fraud scandal broke, did you ever place pressure on him to make agency head changes or make any other changes early on in the scandal? So
the governor's been clear that, the buck stops with him. He is taken this on. He's been focused on it. And, I know that what has happened again under the previous legislative session and this last legislative session, I think it's important work. And I also am looking forward to Governor Amy Klobuchar, who I like her chances, by the way. And, she's put out a powerful platform, and look forward to supporting her and her efforts.
What would you say your relationship is like with the governor? Obviously, in recent years, you rarely speak together in public. Have you been in lockstep with his administration? So,
the governor and I, people I think are used to the Walz-Flanagan administration and Tim and Peggy. We've got a good relationship. I was just with him last week, and it's been important for me to step out on my own, to show folks that this is the Peggy Flanagan for U.S. Senate campaign. It's what we've been doing over, the last year on the campaign trail has really been to demonstrate that, when my name is on the door, it's my name and my name alone, and delivering for folks in Minnesota, fighting for them in Washington to make sure that they can afford the lives they want to live. That is my priority and my agenda, and that's what I've tried to demonstrate to folks.
The last thing I'll ask you, when it comes to the electability argument, obviously that's what Congresswoman Craig really uses, is she believes she's more electable. And if you were a general election candidate, the Republicans would come at you with everything and paint you as extremely far left. I know Adam Schwarzy was in this room and said you were a communist. How would you fight back against that portrayal? How would you convince maybe that moderate voter that you were, not as radical as they're going to make you seem?
Well, here's the deal. I am certainly a progressive, but at the root of being a progressive is progress. We don't have to agree on every issue, but what I am very clear on is that I am running to help people afford the lives they want to live, and the high cost of healthcare, of childcare, of housing. These are the things that I'm going to fight for. What I'd also say is, I'm a kid who grew up on the margins, and I know what it feels like to try to stretch $20 through the end of the month. And when I see families going through the grocery line, and a mom ask her kid to put something back because they simply don't have enough money to cover it, I feel that and understand what that's like. When I was the executive director of Children's Defense Fund Minnesota, I co-chaired the campaign to raise the minimum wage and index it to inflation. We got that across the finish line, and since that time, the minimum wage has gone up every year for the last decade. They haven't increased the minimum wage in Washington in over 16 years. It's still $7.25. I'm going to fight to increase people's wages. When my daughter was still portable and I could hold her on my hip, I was one of the co-founders of Minnesotans for Paid Family and Medical Leave. We got that done when she was in fourth grade. It was signed into law. It was enacted when she was in seventh grade, which tells me you get what you organize for. And that should be people's expectation, for their leaders. But when it comes to this issue of electability, I just want to, remind folks that we've been leading by double digits in the polls. We are up by 24 points in greater Minnesota. We were able to secure this endorsement walking into Rochester with 75% support from the delegates. And we won that endorsement because we've been talking to voters. And what we have heard is that people are not interested in, bending to Republicans, and fighting for a defensive crouch. They want someone to be bold. So, I'm confident that we can win this race. We can win this race by being beholden to Minnesotans and not corporate interests. And that's where we're going to win in August and then go on to win in November.
All right, Lieutenant Governor, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome back. After last weekend's convention in Duluth for the Minnesota Republicans, there is still essentially a three-way race in the primary this August for governor. That's between businessman Kendall Qualls, GOP House Speaker Lisa Damuth, and MyPillow founder Mike Lindell. We're taking a look at the state of the race on both sides right now.
For the first time in 8 years, there's an open seat for governor this fall in Minnesota. In the August primary, U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar is expected to secure the Democratic nomination.
I love the people of Minnesota.
As she runs on a platform of transforming state government.
On day one, I will begin a top-to-bottom audit of our state government.
With nearly $5 million raised so far, Klobuchar's campaign will have a significant cash advantage over any Republican challenger in November. But it's not clear yet who she may face in a general election. There are 3 Republicans running in the primary for the right to presumably take on Klobuchar: House Speaker Lisa Damuth, businessman Kendall Qualls, and MyPillow founder Mike Lindell. Qualls, who joined KARE 11 on the record earlier this year, won the party's endorsement for governor at last weekend's state convention.
Well, it takes a lot of work to win the endorsement, but more than anything, it is winning hearts and souls of just regular, everyday Minnesotans that are really tired of taking a look at how expensive it has become to live and work here in Minnesota.
Qualls has called on Republicans to rally around him as the endorsed candidate. Traditionally, that's what the Minnesota GOP has done, bypassing a competitive primary in favor of the endorsing process at the convention.
These are people in the grassroots. These are voters around the state that have had an opportunity to meet all the candidates and make a decision locally and statewide. And this convention is a culmination of that.
But in a shift, there will be a competitive primary for governor this year in the GOP. House Speaker Lisa Dameth has questioned the convention balloting process and will no longer abide by her pledge to honor the endorsement.
Our phones have absolutely been blowing up. We are hearing from Minnesotans that are saying, go forward in this. We need you. And that's what has made our decision.
She's the top elected Republican in Minnesota state government.
I am the best qualified Republican candidate, no matter what.
And then there's Mike Lindell, who has also officially filed for the primary.
I'm going to put out the budget, probably the best budgets ever of any governor in history that would be coming out. I'm hoping to get it out before the primary. But we have to win right now. People and companies are leaving Minnesota.
The MyPillow founder, who was found liable for defamation last year over his claims about the 2020 presidential election being stolen, is the most closely aligned with President Trump. Trump hasn't given an endorsement in the race, but says Lindell deserves to be governor of Minnesota.
This is the most critical midterm election in the history of Minnesota, and probably the nation.
As I mentioned, having a competitive primary for a statewide office in Minnesota is rare for Republicans. For the most part, in recent memory, they have just gone with that endorsed candidate. But we talked with former state Senate Majority Leader and Republican strategist Amy Frederickson about why she believes the change toward a primary would be a good thing for the party as a whole.
Every other state just has a strong primary system because it allows hundreds of thousands of Democrats or hundreds of thousands of Republicans to go to the ballot as they are used to and choose who they want to have on the final ballot. And that seems the most fair. That seems the most democratic. This idea of a couple thousand, in the end, it was 1,700 people that voted in the final ballot for governor. 1,700 folks get to speak for me and hundreds of thousands of Republicans across the state. That just doesn't make sense. That feels very party insidery.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of KARE 11 On the Record. Remember, you can catch us every Sunday at 6:30 a.m. and streaming throughout the day Sunday on KARE 11 Plus.